This is the JTV Caribbean News. I am Sean Rose. Jamaica's government is planning a new measure that would impose a levy on withdrawals from banks. Part of a revenue-raising scheme for a government that continues to be in a serious debt situation, the levy will be chargeable on all withdrawals from deposit-taking institutions by way of electronic banking, point-of-sale transactions, checks, automated banking machine, automated teller machine, or over-the-counter and internet transfers, according to Finance Minister Dr. Peter Phillips. According to Carib Journal, for transactions less than around $9,128 the levy rate is 0.1%, or about $9. For smaller withdrawals like Jamaican $1,000 or about $10, the levy is about 10 cents. The tax is higher on larger deposits. The measure has led to significant controversy in Jamaica. The Citizens Action for Principle and Integrity said it would launch an online protest initiative against the tax, which becomes effective June 1. The tax has been heavily criticized by the main opposition Jamaica Labour Party, and former Finance Minister Audley Shaw termed the fiscal measure as cruel and iniquitous. Shaw said the government should find the projected revenue through public sector reform and warned that banks would put additional cost on customers to carry out the process of deducting and paying over the taxes to the government. Is the Latin American and Caribbean region the next global breadbasket? That's the finding of a new report by the Inter-American Development Bank and the Global Harvest Initiative, which found that the region could help feed a global population of 9 billion by 2050. With population growth and dramatic diet changes set to place great stress on agriculture across the globe, the Latin American and Caribbean region will have a role to play in addressing this challenge, according to the report. Latin America has immense potential to help meet our planet's growing demand for food, feed, fiber, and fuel in a sustainable, productive way, said Dr. Margaret Ziegler, Executive Director of the Global Harvest Initiative. Today, the region contributes about 11% of the value of current world food production and has about 24% of the world's arable land. Already the largest net food exporting region in the world, the Latin American and Caribbean region has achieved only a fraction of its potential to expand agricultural production for regional consumption and global export, said Jinya Truitt Nakata, Operations Senior Specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank. The next 10 to 20 years offer a critical window of opportunity to advance new forms of productive and environmentally sustainable agriculture in the region. The Cayman Islands government is waiting for the go-ahead from the United Kingdom to present the country's budget next month. Cayman Islands Premier Honorable Alden McLaughlin tells Cayman 27 the date is likely to be May 23rd for his administration's presentation of the spending plan. However, this is subject to approval by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. The Cayman Islands government is looking for a projected surplus of more than $100 million, while cutting a further $12 million in spending. The budget must be approved before the 30th of June. Farmers and students in St. Lucia learned more about control measures for the invasive giant African snail. St. Lucia and Barbados have been working on the management and eradication of the giant land snail. More in this report by Alison Kentish from HTS News Force.
Dr. Trevor Smith oversees the giant African snail eradication program at the Florida Agricultural Division of the United States Department of Agriculture. The state of Florida is the only place where the snail, which is a threat to plant and public health, has been successfully eradicated. Now, the renowned entomologist is sharing best practices and effective action plans with partners on St. Lucia. He delivered a lecture at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College on Wednesday, April 16th. He says the goal must be the eradication of the species.
The biggest and most important aspect is public outreach. If we didn't have the public working with us in Florida, this program would fail from the beginning. And luckily, because snails are kind of gross and people in Florida don't like them, we have a lot of support. So whenever one's seen in someone's yard, they call in one of our helpline numbers and tell us where it's located, and we'll send out inspectors to collect it. We also, in addition to hand collection, we also used molluscicides that were actually tested in Barbados a couple of years ago against the giant African snail.
The college's principal, Ubandolo, says the institution was pleased to host the esteemed entomologist and the educational event. He says the lecture is an important component of the drive to educate farmers and agricultural officials about strategies to eradicate the snail and other invasive species.
We believe that when you have things like invasive species, that it is important that everybody play their part in trying to eradicate it, because one of the things about having pests around is that if you do it 90% of the places and 10%, clearly the 10% will just come back and invade as it would the 90%. So we really want to get as much of the public, as possible.
The workshop was organized by the Public Affairs section of the U.S. Embassy to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. Public Affairs Officer Yolanda Crony says the embassy is committed to assisting Barbados and St. Lucia in the fight against the giant African snail.
So we're so thrilled to have Dr. Smith with us, and his team has worked on the eradication of the snail in Florida. So to share some information, to share some of the research that's been conducted in the region, and also just to talk about the ways that folks can go about preventing other invasive species. I mean, it's important when you have people moving around through the region, what works well in one ecosystem may not work in another. So talking about how folks can prevent, not just into the United States, but across islands in the region, packing a pest, bringing something that may wreak havoc on another ecosystem.
Presently, the giant African snail threatens multiple crops in the Eastern Caribbean, resulting in a large but uncalculated drain on the agricultural sector. The snails also threaten the health of citizens as they are carriers of meningitis. In a time of decreasing crop yields due to changing weather patterns, the management and ultimate eradication of the giant African snail is an important economic, agricultural, public health and environmental issue for St. Lucia. Alison Kentish, HTS News Force.
Guyana says it expects to make its first shipment of rice this year to Venezuela. This year's initial rice shipments were delayed due to the civil unrest in Venezuela. Agriculture Minister Dr. Leslie Ramsamy said Georgetown expects to ship an estimated 100,000 tons of rice and paddy to the Spanish-speaking neighboring country by the end of April. Guyana expects to be making 2 shipments a week to Caracas until November this year as part of the 200,000 tons agreement. The Rice Pact was initiated in 2010 between former President Barack Jagdeo and the late President of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez. The agreement aims to strengthen food security in both countries. In 2011, Guyana signed a $54 million U.S. agreement with Venezuela to supply 50,000 metric tons of paddy at $520 US per metric ton and 20,000 metric tons of white rice at $800 US per metric ton. Last year, Guyana exported $130 million US worth of rice to Venezuela. For the JTV Caribbean News, I am Sean Rose.
Coming up next on JTV News, government withdraws appeal case against former Permanent Secretary Julian Willock. Library digitization project improves access to information on Virgin Islands heritage and history. The 48th Easter Festival activities on Virgin Gorda has been deemed a success. And Line brings joy to Brigada Flags Educational Center with big surprises.